All right, you guys, welcome yet again to another episode of the Online Prosperity Show. And as you already know, this is the number one place where we unpack the real stories behind the people that are solving problems you didn't even realize were costing you growth. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga. And let's be honest, a lot of leaders don't actually fail because they lack strategy. They already have that strategy down packed. But you know what actually makes them fail? They fail because their people never fully buy into that change, and we're about to solve that problem today because I'm bringing to the show Kathy Imwalle. Now, Kathy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it is such a pleasure to be here. I've been so looking forward to this.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. I've seen and heard a little bit about what it is that you do, but today I can't wait to unpack that. And for those that are joining us for the very first time, if you've ever tried to lead a team, maybe shift direction or build something meaningful and maybe felt that resistance or confusion or just pure chaos, on the factory floor or in the shop floor, then this episode is definitely for you. And I know already those that are watching, you're going to want to share this with either your boss or your leader or people that are in your space. But before you do that, make sure you are subscribed to the Online Prosperity Show so that you don't miss out on the conversations that we have coming next. And I've already shown you who's coming on the show today. That's Kathy, and she is somebody who's gone from being a wrangler in the mountains to literally working in the middle of nowhere. And obviously she's also become someone that organizations call when everything feels like it's falling apart internally. And it just obviously is one of those things that if you don't master chaos within the business without you burning out the people that you're working with, you're actually wasting the investment that you have gone on and created. So I could go on and talk about things that I'm not even qualified to talk about, but obviously you're going to be hearing from Kathy, who is the founder of a Pivot Concept and also a fractional chief change officer. And obviously for those that are listening right now, it basically means when your business is trying to evolve or scale or maybe just survive, she's the one that's making sure that your people don't break in the process. And there's things that are happening, changes happening all around us, and sometimes we might have the strategies from all the videos, books and podcasts that we listen to, but if we don't have ways to implement that change, it will all amount to nothing. So, Kathy, I mean, obviously you've been doing this for 20 years. The last thing you need is a 20-minute introduction from somebody who knows nothing much about what it is that you do. Tell us a little bit about how you got started and what is this about wrangling that, I came across.
Being a wrangler up in the mountains, it's a matter of dealing with change after change after change. You have to be able to respond to what the elements are throwing at you at any minute, and the animal you're riding, and the animals you were trying to get going in the same direction. So being in the mountains, it really created a foundation of strength and resiliency. I learned that I was going to have to deal with whatever life threw at me, and I needed to figure out a way how to handle it right then and there with whatever tools I had in my pockets. So
Mm,
it was an incredible experience growing up like that.
absolutely. I mean, obviously, for some people that wouldn't know what a Wrangler is, I thought it was just a pair of jeans.
Well, yeah, some people think that's just a pair of jeans, but really it's someone who gets on the back of a horse, moves people and animals through the mountains or the fields or the meadows or however that works. But for me, it was the mountains.
Absolutely. And what I like about that scene now is it paints a picture of the unpredictability of everything else that, you would have to come across, animals like if you've ever been in a movie or in a TV show, they say it's the worst thing is to work with babies and animals because you never know what they are going to do. Now, some people would think this is somewhat of a masculine sort of job. How would you have gotten involved in all of this?
It was just what needed to be done. When I was young, I went, to work for a neighboring ranch, and work was a requirement. I could either work on this ranch or I could work on this ranch. Those were the only options. Not working was not an option. So I got into it because I always had a love for horses. And I thought, at 9 years old, how cool would that be? I'll just go and ride horses all day. Little did I know. It's an incredibly intense job. It takes a lot out of you on a physical level. I would go home exhausted and filthy every single day. But I loved the work. I loved the variety of it. I loved, of course, the animals and the good, kind-hearted people who are very stoic in the mountains more often than not. And I loved being out in nature. And it was an amazing fit. And I learned so much about what I could do and what I was, what I needed to problem solve my way out of. It was a great experience.
Absolutely. What I really like about that is it really sets you up for where you then went on because not only were you just wrangling, the cattle in the middles there, you also went on and wrangled so many different industries. You were ERP, telecom, biotech, real estate. I mean, if you can figure out a bull, you can figure out a bull market, right?
Absolutely. It started me off on being curious about how things work. How do things tie together? How did the string of events happen in order to be able to get to a successful outcome? And as a wrangler, it's that everybody comes out alive. And it's that intensity that happens within companies because when they step into a change, sometimes it's the company that fails and everybody's out of a job because something does not pull through and thrive. It's it's high stakes work. And so I got really curious about, well, what does this company do? What does this industry do? How does this work? Oh, that looks interesting. I'm going to go work over there. And I chose programming, management information systems early on in order to have the flexibility to go play in whatever sandbox I was curious about. And so I did. I went and played everywhere and realized there's a lot of commonality between industries that you just wouldn't think was there.
You see, the thing is, some people would think a real estate industry is completely different to pharmaceuticals, and the people that are
You would
involved with the
think.
systems, the processes, what works in real estate. It's a fast-paced, fast-moving sort of industry, whereas pharmaceuticals, there's years and years of research and then delivering on a product. So it's a whole different way. Now, by you moving around in and out of these industries, what felt connected the most, especially that you then took with as you went along?
This the stability of the foundation of the company itself, how information flows from one person to another, whether or not it's accurate, whether or not you can get to it when you need it, and how quickly you can get to it. That is like the foundational element of every company out there, be it in real estate, where you need to make sure you understand what's going on with the market. You need to understand what's happening with your appraisers. Everybody needs to be aware of the costs on every single job that's happening. And each sale is a job. It's just a project. There's all sorts of different components that have to be watched, but it all comes down to how do you create those stability? How do you create that stability within the environment so that you have what you need when you need it? In pharma, it's the same exact thing. I need to have clean, quality data. I need to be able to get to it when I need it. I need to be able to trust that the people are going to put their components in place that I have absolutely no control over whatsoever. And I need it to flow in the right direction. When you implement change in either one of those environments, you are still dealing with the human components. You're dealing with the people who are going to be unregulated. They're going to be afraid. They're going to be frustrated. They're going to, feel anxiety. In either one, you're still dealing with those components. And there are ways that you can approach it that are very similar.
Now, even though you've got a Wrangler's background, but you did stay put for 20 years at Bayer. And
I did.
obviously, if you can just give us a cross section of, what a typical day would have been like, even if it's across so many years, just so we have an understanding of
Ah,
what it is you're doing there.
I had so much fun at Bayer because I started with a company that they acquired. And I actually built the entire IT infrastructure of that company before that they were acquired. I got to play in research and development in that area. And that's when I moved, once they got acquired, I moved into more formal project management and actually doing global implementations all over the world. By the end, I had worked in so many different places. I'd worked in agriculture, I'd worked in pharma, I'd worked in research and development, I'd worked in commercialization. Where they put me to do the most good was at the Global Digital Launch and Adoption group. And we actually created that group in order to be able to help initiatives that were going to impact every site in every country all over the world. How do we implement those in a way that meet the needs of both corporate and the site themselves?
Mm.
And my specialty is adoption. So I got to play in a lot of different areas.
Absolutely. And what I heard there was obviously you came from another company and sort of were acquired, and then you had
Mhm.
to inherit whatever legacy systems that were in there. What were some of the change methodologies that you actually then had to implement? Because so many people are either buying businesses or being bought as a small startup. And
Mhm.
half of the time it takes 2 to 3 years and then it just doesn't blend or gel just because, the old people are not accepting the new and the new are not accepting the old or things of that nature.
The most important thing to focus on when you're dealing with an acquisition or a divestment, even if the same goes for both, because I've been a manager of both. It's you look at how do we protect the culture that's there, and how do we ensure that what's working doesn't get broken? How do we understand what is working? And then also, how do we make sure that the people who are involved are in a safe enough place that they can continue to move forward and do a great job, even though the one common thread across all acquisitions and divestments is anxiety of every single person who's there. Am
Mm.
I still going to have a job? Am I going to be able to support my children? Am I going to be able to support my family? That's a pretty high level of threat. And so, how do you settle someone down enough to be able to continue to do their job with confidence when their level of threat is all the way up their eyeballs? It's it's a challenge. So, how do you navigate those tools? You have to be aware of them and do it deliberately and slowly.
I like the fact that obviously, as human beings, we have to stay in what they call stasis, right? Everything is a-okay, and there's no threats coming out. And, in the world we live in, we don't have any saber-toothed tigers coming to attack us while we're, moving our animals through, a meadow or something like that. But these days, jobs pose it that threat. Now, when you were at Bayer, something would have happened internally that made you say, I can't stay here anymore. Otherwise, you would still be there, right?
Absolutely. I had so many opportunities to explore new ideas and new areas with Bear. The opportunities were unlimited. The challenge I ran into is Bear went through a shift. They went through a huge shift to move into, I think it's a dynamic shared ownership, so that they're trying to change where decisions are made and how decisions are made. And it's a huge cultural adjustment particularly for a company as large and as rooted in hierarchy as M.E.D.I.A is. And they went down a philosophical path that I could not continue with. They had decided that they wanted to reduce the levels of change management involved in change, that people know what needs to be done and they're just going to do it and it's going to be fine. So we don't have to do formal change management practices as much. We don't necessarily have to train people. We can just create videos for them and they can watch the videos and they'll get what they need and that'll be fine. Because they were listening to the wrong voices. They were listening to the voice that says, I don't have time for this training. But the training still must be done. The knowledge must still be transferred. So you can either transfer the knowledge in a way that will never be used and will be immediately forgotten, or you can transfer the knowledge in a way that will be adopted, integrated, and actually create use within that person. And they were going in the wrong direction from my perspective, and they didn't actually even realize it. I've heard from others that they have since course corrected and they're doing much better now. But at the time, I just wasn't a good fit for them anymore. I believe in human touch. I believe in the contact. I believe in training in such a way that it can be embedded. I believe in training in methods based in neuroscience, not based in ticking the box. So we're going to part ways on a philosophical level.
Absolutely. And you know what I like about that is you've been on the side where, change is being implemented and like you said, it wasn't handled in the right sort of way. And you felt like there was that sort of mismatch at that particular time. Did you maybe think it would have had anything to do with you, or was the company all to blame because you would have also been evolving in the process, as a person?
Oh, I'm sure everybody plays a part in whatever change happens in your life. I definitely think it might have been just my time to leave the company. I was getting a bit bored where I was at. I wanted to do more and felt like I couldn't. There were so many changes going on and they were changing in such a way that was creating such a high level of anxiety. Whenever I wanted to reach out to do something, it seemed like it was going to be blocked. It was just the state of change that they were involved in, and I was just too far down over here, and I felt like I could not make the impact that I really needed to make on the company.
Mm.
It might have just been time. I'd been there a really long time.
Absolutely. Now, a lot of leaders might be listening to this and saying, oh, so if that is how they felt, then maybe that's got nothing to do with me. But how would, if you were the leader that was looking at somebody who felt the way you were feeling, how would you have managed Kathy at that particular moment?
I would have given Kathy everything she wanted. I would have sat down and said, okay, well, tell me about your concerns and what are they founded in? And then I would have been able to evaluate, okay, are these fear-based concerns? Are these things that are just coming up because Kathy's anxious about her personal security and her personal environment? Or are these things that I really should be taking seriously because they could impact my company further down? Are there going to be a bunch of people who feels the way Kathy does? Or is it, just kind of her? And I could ask her for advice. Well, how is it that I could support your journey better? That's how I would manage that situation. I would want to mine it for information, that person, that Kathy, and
Mm.
then apply it to ways that I could make things more successful. And then I could also say, what you're looking for isn't a fit anymore in our structure. I would be able to say, maybe it's just not a good fit for you anymore. It was for these reasons, but maybe now it's not anymore. And I think that's a gift that management can give their people sometimes, is saying, hey, sometimes relationships are meant to part.
Absolutely, because without that, we wouldn't probably have been having this conversation because they then allowed you to then go out there and do amazing things. What then happened after that conversation?
I thought about what my options were. I took some time to just settle down and settle in, because when you've been under that level of stress for that number of years, because this is a process that took 3 years to get through, I needed some time to just let my own nervous system settle. And then I needed to change within myself. I needed to shift gears and look at different ways of motivating myself, look at different goals and aspirations. What is it that I really wanted to do? And what it came down to is I wanted to continue to work with other companies and to work with change, but I wanted to do it in a way where I was still emotionally invested. One of the challenges I had with the idea of consulting is it seems like there's so much separation. It's like not even dating. It's like maybe speed dating. You know, you sit, you talk for a little while, you hand them a piece of paper or whatever, and then you move on. But there's no attachment. And I really love the feeling of being attached to a company. So when I found the concept of working as a fractional change officer, that made me really excited, because then I could have the impact and influence on companies that I really wanted to do, because I would love to make the world a better place. That's always my goal. I could invest emotionally with my time into a company, but not do it full time. I could do that for a couple of different companies and create a lot of balance in my life. So it seemed like a really great option for me.
Absolutely. It reminds me of, breakfast, what you're just talking about there, where if in your breakfast there's eggs and bacon and mushrooms and, whatever it is that constitutes a full breakfast, the the pig in there would have made a commitment, but
Mhm.
the chicken made a contribution, which obviously they put in that egg in there. The chicken is still out there living in and its life. So this is exactly what it is that you went on and did, making a contribution to different plates in the marketplace and things like that. So how does that look now? What is it that people can actually grab when they come over and start talking to you, and what have you created?
I've created a framework for change so that companies can actually create the future that they want to live in. One of the things I've discovered in the decades of work in change environments is that change isn't just that thing itself. Change is the process that you go through. The change is its impact on your culture. Change is the impact on what it creates in your future. Change actually is the vehicle that you use to create the future you're looking for. And it's not just that tool that you're putting in place, or that structure or that process or that workflow. It's actually defining the culture of your company. It's the foundational element of your company and can make or break you. So focusing in on change is something I'm really passionate about. And it's lovely to be able to work with a set of leaders and help them understand the components of change that are creating the culture that they see, the behaviors that they see, and and the future that they want to create for their company, because that's the key that many people miss, is they skip the part that the change is the thing that creates the culture.
Mm.
And when they work with me, they shift their leadership practices. They become a little bit more aware of where they are uh, regulated, where they're not regulated, what their reactions are, how they get triggered, etc. And that stabilizes them as leadership. But then it also allows them to say, hey, this is the type of work environment that I would love to have within my company for the people who work for me. And it gives them the tools they need to actually create that, using change as the framework to get there. And we design that framework together. So we go through a process that I've developed. It's a pivot concept. And once they go through that process, they end up with a team of people in their company who can initiate and successfully implement change, but do it in a way that creates the future that everyone wants to be a part of.
Absolutely. Now, before we get into the framework, because I think this is the core of what it is that you're doing,
Okay.
I did ask you earlier on what the leader could have done, and then you
Oh,
say
yeah.
just give Kathy what she wants. Now, a lot of people actually just believe that maybe resistance to change means people are being difficult. Um,
Oh,
is
yeah.
it, I mean, it is actually resistance, or is it actually resistance, or is it a deeper, something deeper that leaders should actually be aware of when this is happening?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Resistance is one of my favorite things,
Mm.
mainly because resistance is unavoidable. It's going to happen. You can't get rid of it and you can't avoid it. When you're going to change, even if it's a change you choose to do, there's a part of you that's going to resist. That resistance does a whole lot of things for us. First, it pressure tests whether or not this change is actually viable, whether or not it's something that's going to work, whether or not it's something that's really necessary. So it puts pressure against the change to make sure that it's better than what you thought of originally. It also tells you all the different areas that that change could fail. So it tells you all, when someone says, well, I don't want to do it because this will break, or because that will break, or because this will be uncomfortable, or will take too much time, or whatever complaint it is that they have that the resistance brings up, odds are it's highlighting something in your change that you could actually bolster, you could reinforce, you could shift in order to make that change initiative stronger and more viable and more likely to be successful in the end. So resistance is something that, yeah, we need to like help people settle through, because if we get stuck in resistance, we never get out of it. So there's a process that you can go through in order to help someone move through their resistance. But while it's happening, it is the best possible thing that could happen for your change. It gives you all the information you need.
Mm, see, talking about breakfast, right, Kathy? I have two girls in my household, and I can't even get them to eat breakfast. But you did say and that's a little bit of resistance in and of itself, right? And you did say there's a process to untangle that. Maybe you can walk us through what that looks like, just so that people are aware of, whatever tools that they might have handy, which
Mhm.
they can utilize to curb that resistance.
Well, it really depends on the level of resistance you're sitting across from. The first step is to notice where you are as a leader. What's going on in your body? If I'm sitting with you and you are in resistance to something, I know that your anxiety levels are going to be higher. Your annoyance levels are going to be higher. You're going to be gritting your teeth already because you're already feeling it. You're already wanting to push back. As a leader, how am I feeling? Am I annoyed? Am I frustrated with the fact that I have to face your resistance? Do I see you as an opponent? Where are my thoughts? And then I have practice, and it's different for everybody, how we settle ourselves into more of a neutral zone. I settle myself into a neutral zone before I come and talk to you, so that when I'm talking to you, I am regulated, I am calm, I am ready to face whatever it is that you've got going on, and I can ask better questions because all of my energy is up in my frontal lobes.
Mm.
When a person's in resistance, most of their energy is in the back, in the amygdala, where they're trying to control the threat. They're just responding to, the pressures. I can help you regulate just by being calm myself so that you can actually start thinking about things a little bit differently. As I ask you questions, your nervous system settles down. As you answer those questions, you get more and more at ease because I'm asking questions that are of a curious nature. I want to know what's going on within this thing. And then I ask you for solutions. What are some of the things that we can do in order to resolve that? Some things we can't fix. Some things, we can't resolve. We can offer comfort in those areas, but we're not going to have all of the answers. But when I ask you questions and ask you to help me solve them, the resistance starts to settle and they're able to move forward and be like, well, maybe this isn't such a bad idea. Maybe we could do this. It's going to suck, but maybe we can get there.
Mm.
Sometimes that's the goal.
That's a completely different approach. And for those that have been listening throughout, you've been working with horses, and I do understand and know that horses actually can sense if you're friend or foe, or if you're nervous, or whether
Yep.
they can carry through with you, or they're not safe around you, and things of that nature. Is that what you mean by nervous system regulation? Because so many people would just maybe throw a personality test and then say, oh, because this person is this way inclined, so that's the reason why they're responding to me like this.
I think those personality tests are great. I think they can provide a lot of wonderful information for helping someone get past something. Like if you've got someone who's completely data oriented, give them all the data. If you've got someone who's like, I just need to make a decision, keep it a summary. Give them 2 sentences. That's important information. But when you're, wanting to regulate yourself as if you were standing in front of a horse, how are they going to respond to you? That's not just helping them regulate, but it's also making sure that your energy is up here in the frontal lobes where you have access to your, conscious planning and your conscious thoughts, and your reactions can be much more deliberate instead of flaring off and, you know, getting into a spiral.
Throwing a tantrum and spitting the dummy, as they would say. So
Yes.
what I quite like about this is, you more many consultants will just focus on, yeah, we've got the strategy, here's the paperwork, like you said, and or the execution of it all, that the SOPs and things of that nature. But you are literally focusing on how people experience this change. And if you could just really point out, why is that the real game? Because most people would think, we've told you what to do, you've seen how it's supposed to be done, now go and create widget A or B, and if you can't do it after 3 tries, then yeah, I think you're not a good fit.
If you circle it back to yourself, if you wanted yourself to change, how successful would that approach be? If you want to, say, change your body, and you just said, look, you're just not going to eat anymore. Or you're going to start working out for 2 hours a day, every day. You're going to get up at 6 a.m. and that's what you're going to do. And if you just told yourself that and then just said, suck it up, that's what you're going to do, a lot of humans would not be able to do that themselves. They'd be setting themselves up for failure. I think that's what happens with most New Year's resolutions.
They don't go past February, yes.
Oh, you make it to February? You're impressive.
Yes. Right.
Yeah, so there is that mindset, and in the manufacturing industry, and also in the pharma industry, in research and development, in those hierarchical, really regulated environments, that mindset of just do what I say and we're gonna be fine. It's prevalent, and they find that things struggle and they're confused simply because it shouldn't be like that. They think in their own mind, I should just be able to tell you what to do and you should just do it. And it shouldn't be this way, that you're having such a problem, or that all 12 of you were having such a problem. It shouldn't be like this, which means that they no longer have any solutions available to them. They can't problem solve if it shouldn't exist.
Mm.
And that's what gets them stuck in that mindset. And when they shift their mindset into, okay, well, let's try to do something a little bit different, and let's see how quickly we can move into adoption. And we define adoption in completely different ways, but How do we move quickly into adoption while supporting the person through the process without it being something that triggers the leader themselves? Because those leaders who say, just get it done, when as soon as you tell them there's a better way, they're like, no, there isn't. So how
Mm,
do you help convince that leader that maybe there is a different way? Maybe there is a better way. And how do we pull in their own experiences, their own evidence that this will be more successful than what they were doing before? A lot of times turning someone around is about how do you discover the evidence that exists within the human across from you that supports what you want them to do. That's just the psychology of it.
absolutely. So you're literally using their words, their mannerisms, and who they are, just so they accept that whole concept. But in other words, Kathy, you're literally telling them that whatever they've been doing doesn't work, or they are not as clever as they think they are. There is another way, because if they knew any better, they would do better. So I always think and know that fish don't see the water that they swim in. And
Yep.
it only takes somebody to come in and then maybe break their normal patterns for them to actually see that something needs to be done. So if I brought you into a company today, what are some of the first signs that you look for that obviously this change is going to fail no matter how hard people try?
First, I would look at the data.
Mm.
I love data. Um, what metrics do they have to determine whether or not the data that comes out of whatever this change is clean data that I can rely on in order to make decisions? How much attention am I paying to the data that's going to be created and how it's going to impact my company? If I see that they're not actually putting in place ways to measure the cleanliness of the data that they'll be creating, I'm suspicious of whether or not they're going to get what they're looking for. If I look into the meetings and the planning processes, how are people showing up in the meetings? Are there conversations? Are there speakers and then just listeners? Is there a really wide gap between the speakers and the listeners? Are they getting the feedback that they're looking for? Because if there's one person talking and the rest of the people are listening and then just exchanging glances, that's a really good indicator that you're not getting the information you need to be successful. And I look at, what do they look at from a training perspective? How hands-on is it? How many experts are they creating in it? What's the training practices? I look at all of those elements, and then I also look at their culture. What is the culture that they're trying to create? Um, Pick a cultural word, like you've worked with a lot of different companies and, they've got their vision and their mission. If there was a word you were going to think of, give me an example of a word for a culture you would have in a culture.
People call themselves innovative, or
Innovative.
yeah.
Innovative is perfect because so many companies want to remain innovative and it's such a great word. Are the practices they're doing actually allowing innovation to happen? Do they punish people when they fail deeply? Do they allow experiments and do they actually look at what they learned from those experiments and be able to build on them? When they're creating the change in itself, are the practices that they are using within the change actually supporting an innovative culture? Because if your mindset is, if we are an innovative company, but I want you to do what I tell you when I tell you, you can't have an innovative company in a world of just cogs and wheels.
So it's
They
more like
don't fit.
do as I say, not. I mean, is it do as I say, not as I do type setup, and it
Yeah.
defeats the
If
whole
you,
process.
yeah, the actions you are creating through the change don't actually meet the culture that you say you're trying to create within your company. And I look for breaks within that. So I look at the culture they say they want And then I look at the actions they take while they're implementing change without any of my influence. What actions are they taking as they implement that change? And I see what the gap is. If there's a lot of gap, then I'm pretty sure that change is not going to work out very well for that company. One, it's going to influence a culture that they don't actually want. And two, it's not going to create the return on investment that they're looking for because they're not going to have the data that they need to make decisions. And they're going to have a whole bunch of surprise costs at the end because as soon as their theory hits reality, they're going to have to make adjustments to make it work. And that can get really expensive.
Nice, because yeah, so many people would be at the top of the company in the boardroom saying we're this, but if you go on the factory floor, it's a whole different world in there. Now, you know what I'm noticing here, Kathy. I mean, you just didn't learn change from books. Some people would have read it over many years and things of that nature, but you actually lived it. You've
Yeah.
done it internally, emotionally, and actually psychologically. The fact that you were within that company for like 20 years and then that change started happening, you actually were at the forefront
Yeah.
of all of that, and now you're helping organizations realize that change literally isn't just a strategy problem. It
Right.
is an human experience problem. How are the actual humans that are supposed to carry on this change meant to feel or do or be or behave? And that's a completely different lens. Now, I was holding on to the framework up until now, and I don't think, because it's really now starting to shape up because I wanted the context of what this
Yeah.
actually looks like. So you've now come into this company, you've seen where it's going to break in the seams. What is the framework that you will then follow to make sure that they are actually investing in this change and not just adopting it, but actually getting the return on investment without burning out Kathy and just giving her what she wants, from what I've heard?
Well, the first thing we do is we pinpoint where some of the challenges are. We pinpoint the strengths that we have to work with, and we pinpoint the areas of friction. We look at where's their culture and what are their actions as they go through change and what is that gap, and we identify what is the outcome we're really looking for. We pinpoint the outcome of, is it return on investment? Do I even know what the return on investment was for a change? Did I measure it? Do I even know how to measure it? What behavior metrics can I or should I use? So we're really just looking at what are some of the structural issues that are there, and what are some of the more ethereal issues that are there? Like, what kind of future do I want to be a part of? And that really defines our outcome, because I always believe in, starting with both where are we at and where do we want to go at the same time. Because that gives us the two key points. Where am I? Where do I want to be? And then we can figure it out in the middle. After we get done with that, we want to integrate in the human response. So once we figured out where some of our challenges are and, get some ideas about how we might want to leverage the strengths that we have in order to create this future that we're looking for, what areas can we integrate the human response into? Do we want and need to run leadership through like a conscious leader awareness program where they start to become more aware of what their emotions are, what regulation practices are, what works for them, so that they can start to be, to understand their own regulation cycles, which helps them help others. What are some of the other components that we want to put in place from a neurology standpoint? What kinds of conversations do we need to have with people in order to be able to help this change move into place? What are some of the practices that we can put in just from a neurological standpoint, from a human perspective? Where do we weave that in and how does it go? From there, we look at, validation. How do we validate this plan that we're putting together? And what kind of value measurements do we want to put in place? How do we define our success? How do we create value with this? What does that actually look like? So there's a lot of conversation around, what does this success actually need to look like from an outcome perspective and at each stage of the change that we're going to be putting in place? Because all project management and change plan management go through very specific phases. And we're not trying to adjust that. We're not trying to upend project management or upend change management, because those are incredibly valuable tools. But we are adjusting how we lead through it and what components we put into it and what focus do we have as we're moving through them. If we're looking at adoption as the most important thing and culture creation as the most important thing, if those two things are our goals, we need to know how to measure that and what that's going to look like. So we kind of validate our plan. From there, we go into orchestration. Let's do a pilot. So we've created a structure that is actually unique for this culture, for our actual goals, based on the standards that we already have. Can we test it out? Because up until this point, until we start orchestrating that change, it's all theory. We think it'll work. We can think it sounds great. Let's put the wheels on the ground and see if the car moves. Let's run it through a pilot program. And let's be really careful about what lessons we learn as we learn them, how they're going to adjust us for the next step, how they're going to adjust us for the next project, and really get into what does that experiment look like, and then evaluate it at the end. Once we get done with the pilot, we've got a really solid framework and a team of people who are structured for success in implementing change within the organization, because that's the goal. To have people in place that really know how to do this and have experienced it and want to make it better, that they're enthusiastic about it. We've got some champions. So then let's transfer it. Let's transfer it into the next team. Let's transfer it into the next division. Let's transfer it into the next change initiative. Wherever else it needs to grow to, let's make sure that all of that knowledge is spread throughout the foundation of the company and that it's utilized and that we have a practice for how to learn from this thing and transfer that knowledge into the next thing and then transfer the knowledge into the next thing. So that's becomes the plan. That becomes the practice.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that framework with us, because what that really looks like is you're blending neuroscience, leadership behavior, and all the operation systems, and the outcome that people actually get is that obviously calm execution and the adoption is easy because you're just using the people that are already within that business. And I think that's the greatest ROI there, because like you said, that framework can then be taken on to different projects. It's not like a start goal or whatever it is, or people have to learn how to deal with each other. It's people that have already been working within the business themselves. Now, if a leader is watching this right now and they're thinking, wait a minute, maybe we just might need the Wrangler to come and help us wrangle whatever it is in front of them, where would they start on the internet to find you, Kathy?
Well, the first place to check is my website, pivotconcept.org. And right there at the top, it should be one of the first things you see is schedule a discovery call. Because the most important thing is for us to decide whether or not the challenges you are seeing, I have something that might help. It's a conversation about what you're looking for, what you're looking at, where are you at in your change process? Are you about to initiate something? Did you just get done with something that did not go well at all? Do I have the tools that are going to be able to help support you? So just having a conversation about whether or not we're a good fit to work together is always the first step.
Absolutely, because once you've discovered, what it is, where they are, like you say, and where they want to head to, it makes it easy to implement the framework and, make that work for them. Now, some leaders might also be rolling their eyes and literally looking at the breakfast they just had in their stomachs and thinking, we've tried every change out there, and
Yes.
I don't think there's anything different. You've worked with leaders and they've come back to you years later saying that your work still impacts them. What do you
Yes.
think you would have actually given them that most people can't?
Well, I want to bring this right back onto the ground because I have worked in manufacturing and I've been on the floor. I work with engineers. It's the ultimate outcomes that they're looking for is I'm going to save them money. I'm going to hand the ROI, the return on investment, not only in dollars, but in the performance of their teams. Those are the end result goals that we're really looking for. We're just looking at it in a different way, in a way that might be more successful. And that's the part that brings it right onto the ground. We're going to have higher production, more efficiency, and a cleaner return on investment in so many different ways that they haven't actually seen before in the past. So when they're rolling their eyes about, oh, the neuroscience, yeah, are we going to sit here and breathe? Well, as a matter of fact, we are.
Mm.
um, it actually has a lot of foundation that will, lead to the success that they're looking for, the actual dollars and cents they're looking for. Because I'm all about the clean data. If I don't have clean data at the end, I have failed. It's my
Mm.
thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, obviously, if somebody's watching this right now and they're obviously at their wits' end, but they don't quite have the authority or maybe the wherewithal to make the decision to reach out to you, but they know they're struggling with change right now, is there one thing that they can just do immediately that could completely make the difference and they can start seeing that your methods work?
They should make a list of questions that they could ask. Um, of course, I'm open to have a conversation with anyone, whether they have the authority to pull the trigger or not, because my goal is always to help anybody who comes across my path. If I can offer them something straight away, fantastic. Start to understand what kinds of questions you can ask that will get you the information that you need. Asking better questions is the most important skill you could have when it comes to trying to figure out how to work your way through a problem. So ask questions more along the lines of, well, how do you see that? What is your solution for that? What what came to you and what caused that and where did that go? Have them talk to you about the flow of things, not from a blame perspective, but from an action-oriented perspective. And ask yourself, what behaviors do I want to see? And what do those behaviors look like? When you ask those kinds of questions, those really foundational, what does it really look like in terms of action? When you're asking those types of questions, you'll find that you discover so much more about what you could be doing with change than you were discovering before.
Absolutely. No, Kathy, I can't thank you enough for the time that we spent on the call today. I mean, your journey and everything else that you are helping people create in their businesses, especially just literally giving them back that ROI and also making workplaces much more livable. I think that's very commendable. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. I love it. I can't help it.
Absolutely. Now, for those that are watching right now, thank you all for, obviously coming this far in this conversation. And if there's anything that you can take away from today, I think it's this: the way you actually start leading any change, whether be it at home, in business, in church, or whatever community that you're going to be doing, it literally shapes the future more than the actual change itself, because you're still going to be with those people long after the strategy has gone. I see that in the way that we try and adopt new technologies. And if you then ruffle the teams that are going to be working with that, before you know it, the algorithm has changed. And now you're going to have to go back and say, hey guys, let's start all over again. So I think it's more of building the relationships, and then it makes it easy to then pass on that change. So if you're building a business or leading a team, or maybe just trying to evolve, don't just focus on what needs to change. Start paying attention to how the people actually experience that, because I think that's the most important thing. And obviously, if this episode made you think of someone, maybe a leader, a founder, a team builder, or your immediate boss, right this moment, share this episode with them. Right? Because this might actually be the conversation that changes how they lead forever. And not only are you making the world a better place for yourself, but you're making the world a better place for just about everybody else that might come in contact with this leader. And if you're a leader that somebody has shared this with you, don't take offense and think that something needs to change. No. I know you're building a business. I know you want to grow, and you need to be doing that with the people that are in that business, not against them. So this is what I want you to do. Reach out to Kathy at Pivot Concept. I'll put all those details in the show notes below, and just explore what it means to design a change that actually sticks. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to the Online Prosperity Show? Because obviously in the next episode, we're going to be diving into ideas that will help you create a happier and more aligned existence, both in business and in life. I'm not quite sure what you're going to do with this information, but until then, bye for now.